Like that, I'm always second. So.
Alright. Hey, how's it going, everyone? This is CoalitionM. Thank you for joining me tonight. This is going to be a pretty good night, as usual, because I finally have my almost full house of the semester, and also my first faculty guest. She is a professor in the psychology department here at FHSU, and my other two guests are students who are studying psychology, so we're all pretty familiar with each other by now. I'd like to say just before they introduce themselves that I have said before on my show that I'm not interested necessarily in getting, quote, expert, unquote, voices on here because my main target is students and listening to what regular, ordinary students have to say on issues. I think it's really important that we be exposed to ideas so that we can better understand how we think, how our friends think, how the people we disagree with think. I like to remind myself of an Aristotle quote. It is the mark of an educated mind to entertain an idea without accepting it. And I think that also helps, us become more skilled with hearing someone say something and knowing whether or not what they said deserves any kind of attention or not. Even so, yes, I've invited a maybe more authoritative voice on here, mostly because I want to pick her brain too and maybe mess with them all a little bit. Maybe that's just, sort of poetic justice for everyone who resents psychologists and how they like to pick people's brains some. I don't know. Hope you enjoy. So I have with me Dr. Whitney Jeter and students Becky Yeager and Stephen Bolin. So thank you all for being here, and if you want to go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourselves.
Okay, I gotta go first? Okay.
They've yes, they have.
Okay. I'm Stephen Bolin. I'm a senior here in the psychology department. I'm in the marching band. My favorite color is blue. I don't know.
That's a good color. Yeah.
I am Becky Mayer. I am a senior in the psychology department as well. And my favorite color is green. Huh?
Okay. I'm Dr. Whitney Jeter. I'm the authoritative voice tonight, which I don't necessarily think that that's true, Carson.
Well, we can talk about that.
Okay.
Jeter.
I'm kind of brand new, sort of, to Fort Hays, so I'm going into my second year. My favorite color is yellow. So I think we all have different, pretty different.
Okay. My best friend's favorite color is yellow.
It's a good color. Not necessarily gold, but yellow for sure.
Oh, no.
You don't like yellow?
No! What?
Come on.
Such an
Wait, if you make it neon, does that make it better for you?
No!
Maybe not the bright yellow of Steven's shirt. Like a classic sort of sunshine
highlighter,
yellow.
yeah.
God. All right. We can get into colors later, I guess. So there's something that I want to try out on you guys, if you don't mind. And if you do, I guess you're just going to have to sit through it anyway. So I'm going to ask you some pretty tough questions, hopefully tough. And you can only answer yes or no. You can take as long as you want to answer, but in the end, you can't give an explanation, and you definitely can't say it depends until later. So, are we ready?
Yes.
That's my favorite answer.
Is pure altruism real?
No.
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 Copycats.
Yeah, y'all can just say whatever the teacher says. Are we born with a blank slate?
No. Or yes. Sorry. Yes.
Steven, if that's what you think.
I'm going to say no.
Okay.
Yes. I'm a social psychologist, so I'm going to say yes.
Okay. So we're mixed there. Do opposites attract?
No.
No.
Becky?
We just talked about
Be brave.
Not necessarily no.
No, that doesn't count. You can't say that.
So no?
I'm going to say yes.
Okay. Yes, no. Okay. Is tribalism alive and well today? Whoever says yes, you have a second question to answer.
No.
No.
No. No? Cool. Well, the second question was...
Yeah, let us answer that one.
Okay. The question, if one of you had said yes, was, does it serve us well, then? I guess I should go into more detail about that. So,
Yeah, that would be.
tribalism. So, in-group, out-group. This is us, you are them. We don't like you because you're part of them.
Then I would have to change my answer and say that's yes.
Are we going to be specific and say in the United States?
In humanity.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Does it serve us well?
Currently, no.
Yeah, I was going to say there's no way, no.
No. Okay. So that wasn't bad.
These are tough questions.
Yeah, these are good. Yes. Cool. So that wasn't so bad, I hope. So now I'm going to go back and talk about some of the things that we just said. So everyone said altruism is not real. Why does nobody think altruism is real?
Was that the question? Is it real
Yes.
or does it exist?
There's pure altruism. Pure altruism, sorry.
Do you know we have a debate about this in
Yes,
social
we
psychology?
absolutely did.
Yeah.
Have we gotten that far? I don't
Not
think.
yet.
Okay, I said it.
Yeah, not yet. Yeah, I have to say that I don't necessarily think that pure altruism exists because I'm on the side of the fence, right, where even if you're being pro-social, if you have good intentions, that you might get something out of it as a byproduct. So maybe it makes you feel good, and because of that, I don't necessarily know that true altruism in its purest form actually exists. That's why I think maybe not.
Okay. I remember somebody brought up the example of he gave his used furniture to somebody who was in need.
Yes, I do remember.
And so the problem that some people will have with someone saying no, pure altruism doesn't exist is, well, how do you explain, a dolphin saving a person from drowning? Or how do you explain people doing something for someone else that doesn't seem like there's anything in it for them? So it takes away this, I don't know, I think it's kind of a hope that we're not all selfish, terrible, because people will, assume that by selfish you mean terrible.
For sure. I don't necessarily think, though, that just because pure altruism doesn't exist, that means that we're all selfish. So even if you get something good out of it, maybe you feel good after it, I think that that's still a good thing. You're still helping, right? Even if initially your intent wasn't to get something out of it. But I think by definition, right, pure altruism means that you don't get anything out of it. So I think in class when someone brought up the example, right, of giving away their used furniture, I think I asked, just to play devil's advocate, because it is a really tough question of, would you have done that with your new furniture? And I think he said, well, I don't know. I'd have to think about it. So I think it can be depressing if you say that it doesn't exist, right? But it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing, even if you get something good out of it, like just feeling good, or even if you do something because you think it's the moral or ethical thing to do, right? I think that the end product of helping somebody is what's more important, not necessarily that we're going to say that true altruism definitely exists.
So why did the two of you say no, altruism is not real?
I was just going to say, I think at some subconscious level, we're always expecting something out of it, kind of. Humans want people to like them, so a lot of times we do things to try and get other people to like us, so, that right there alone.
Yeah, I feel like as humans, you're always still looking around at what else is going to come from it. Not necessarily. There's just always something else around with it. Does that make sense?
What's wrong with it?
No, with it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no.
Okay. So there's never going to be a time when somebody does something for another person that's purely just for the other person's sake, and it does nothing. Maybe it kind of makes the other person feel bad a little bit, but they still did it.
I think, like I said, I think it depends on if you're talking about consciously or unconsciously here.
Wait, why?
Well, because, like I said, unconsciously, I think there's always going to be that pure motivation that we want people to like us, but at a conscious level, you may not think or realize that you're wanting that or whatever, so you may think you're just doing it just to do it and not wanting anything out of it.
So you think that we help people because we want, and maybe not, we're thinking, I really want this person to like me, so I'm going to do this, but deep down, that's why we open the door for someone, or because we want to look favorable
I think
to other people.
Yeah, I think it's because we want to feel good about ourselves, and doing little things like that makes us feel better about ourselves.
Yeah.
It's a tough one, too, because like you were saying earlier, Carson, if you say that it doesn't exist, right, it is a very depressing outlook, right, that we're all selfish or we do things for self-vested reasons. But I don't think that it has to necessarily be that way. So even if you get something out of it, that may not have been your original intent. You're still helping. That's a great thing, but maybe it makes you feel good. Or sometimes people help, right? We talked about this a little bit in class. Sometimes people help to feel less guilty. Like if I don't help my friend or if I don't help my significant other, it's going to make me feel bad. I'm still going to help them, which is great. But maybe in the long run, it might be because I'm getting something out of it. But that may not have been the original intent, right? I may not do it because I think it's going to make me feel happy or good. But because it's a byproduct, that might tie into or it might negate the idea of what true altruism really means.
So I want to know what you guys think, because this is what I see when people freak out a little bit over this question, especially if they're not psychology majors. That was the most condescending thing I've ever said, I think, out loud.
Gonna be a psych major.
So people will get, like when you said depressed, or like it doesn't sound good to say about humanity in general that we aren't going to help somebody if there's nothing in it for us. And so it's almost like there's this mindset of we are either selfishness is bad, and if it comes out even a little bit, that makes whoever it's in bad as well. Do you guys see that, and why do you think that's there?
So,
or if it's not there, what's going on then?
So the question is selfishness bad?
So the question is like, it's kind of a long-winded question. So the context is people will look at something like altruism and be like, yes, absolutely, people will go out, will put themselves in front of, I don't know, a train or something to save a child, even though it might kill them. Even if they get out of it alive, they didn't know they were going to get out of it alive.
The trolley problem.
Yeah, the trolley problem, right. So, well, that gets really complicated. We're not going to go into the trolley problem just right now.
No.
So the question is, where does this hesitance to say no, pure altruism isn't real? Where does that come from? Why are people so scared to say that? And I think it's because there's this mindset that selfishness is inherently bad or evil. And if you agree with me, why do you think that's so? And if you don't agree with me, then where does it come from? Where does the hesitancy, where does the, I don't want to say that because that sounds bad. Where does that come from? Why does it matter? Take your time.
That's
Think
a
about
good
it.
one.
Does that make sense, Stephen?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, cool.
I think in general, when people are deemed selfish, it's a negative thing.
Yeah.
And so I think nobody really wants to be that person, if that makes sense. So I think that's where like that cringe or that like kind of distancing from wanting to be that comes from.
So it's just kind of a societal thing.
Yeah.
We see.
That's how we perceive selfishness.
Why do you think that's so? Where does that come from?
I don't know. Part of me wants to say it's because in general we think that like teamwork and working to help the other person is the best thing to do. But I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I definitely agree about society's role in terms of maybe the selfishness that comes out if you say, right, that true altruism doesn't exist, or you're always maybe getting something out of it, even if that wasn't your intent. I think it also kind of has roots in like ethical institutions and organizations, like religion, right? It's the moral or ethical thing to do to give selflessly and to be pro-social without expecting anything in return. And I think sometimes if you say, right, I'm doing this because it makes me happy, even though the outcome is that you're helping, right, and there's something in it for you, that sometimes society looks at that as maybe it's not as pure as it could have been if you were just doing it purely out of the goodness of your heart.
Like pure intention.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
What do you think, Stephen?
I agree with them. It's like because we can't do because there's always that connotation kind of with it where you're doing this for the added benefit of feeling good about yourself or feeling I help these people, that it kind of people want to believe that there's no motivation, like ulterior motivation to it, but we all kind of know that there is. I mean, so
which is kind of interesting. I think when you just hearing you say that made me think about the idea that if maybe society, or if we've been told, whether it be by society or somewhere else, right? If we've been told that it's not a good thing to be selfish, especially when it comes to pro-social intentions, right? Then acting pro-social almost becomes like an obligation, right? So it doesn't
Which is really
necessarily
ironic.
become something, yeah,
Yeah.
like
Then you're doing
I
it
wanna
because
do
you
it.
don't want to seem selfish.
You got it. I don't want to do
Yeah.
it out of the goodness of my heart, right?
Right.
I have to do it because I don't want to seem like I'm not a helpful person or a pro-social person. So in that way, yeah, almost paradoxical, right? Like it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
And it's, if we're talking about human nature, well, you can't necessarily fix that. So if it's, this kind of gets into some like evolutionary psychology, obviously. I should have invited Dr. Hill. I should have invited Trey.
oh god.
But from the little that I know about evolutionary psychology, so there are things that we have become because it benefits us. And if it benefits us to help each other out, that's just how it is. So we're going to help each other out. And the problem, then there's this conflicting societal driving force that's like, but you can't be selfish. But then we look at ourselves and we're like, but this is technically selfish. So then we get like this shame about our human nature, and then we're in this terrible position where like we're trying to, what are we even trying to do? Like we're trying to resist the wrong reason to do something for somebody else, but we still want to do it. But the reason we want to do it is because of our human nature, because it benefits us, So,
Or in that case, benefits you because you get rid of your guilt and your
yeah. So, I guess what I'm trying to say is there's no way you can get out of this. There's no way.
Sorry, I'm over
Steven's cracking up.
Sorry, I'm over here thinking about like the answers Dr. Hill would be giving to this, and it's just making me laugh.
What do you think Trey would say?
I don't want.
He should listen to this.
No. Yeah, he should.
He'll listen to this.
I think he'd have some really creative answers to this.
I mean, yeah.
Because
I'll have to invite him on next time.
evolutionary.
Yes.
We can come back to this in just a second. 'Cause I'm gonna get to the other questions too. So the blank slate. This was mixed. This is a little bit more interesting. So before I say what I meant by that, what did you all think that I meant by that? By blank slate? Are we born with a blank slate? So who said yes? We're born with a blank slate.
I think that was
Whitney did, because she's.
Remind me the exact phrasing of the question.
Are we born with a blank slate?
I'm just making sure that like context. So I have context with
Yeah. So what did you? Because some people said no. So what did the ones who said no? Was that you two?
That was me.
That was just you?
Yeah.
Yep, just
What did you think I meant by blank slate?
I didn't know exactly what you meant, but in general, I would say no, like, even just different situations, I guess.
So what are you talking about there? Are you talking about like people being in situations? Or are you talking about people being born? Or are you
From birth, I don't
Okay.
think
Wait, can I
anybody
change my
has
answer?
one.
Yes, you can change. What was your answer before?
It was yes.
Okay.
I just thought about this.
Yeah, it's a no for me.
Okay.
Genetics. That's
Okay.
why.
Genetics?
This question reminds me of the nature and nurture debate, right? That we talk a lot about
Right.
in psychology,
Yeah.
and it's really hard when you make us pick a side, right? Because we know that biology is important and experiences are important. So this is a hard one.
Well,
Don't ever tell Dr. Hill that it depends. He doesn't like that.
I don't either, so that's why I made you guys do that. What were you gonna say?
well, and I even read a study today about bringing up the whole before you're born, like parents being exposed to certain situations can, have a difference for their children as well. And like,
In what way?
parents put under a certain amount of stress can have a difference on the child when they're born too. So in that aspect, like again, they weren't born with a blank slate because they're taking on that stress that their parents had.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my thought with it.
It's good.
So, Whitney, why do you say yes?
Well,
What do you mean by that?
sure.
Or what did you think I meant, and then?
Yeah, so I definitely thought you meant biology or experience, right? So I say yes just because I was thinking about situations and how, when we're born, of course, there are, of course, certain things that we are born with, that are predispositions and things that we're predisposed to. There's certain senses, right, that work right away whenever we're born. But I'm a big fan of experiences and learning both direct and indirect as shaping the individual, who that person is. When you said that, I immediately just thought about, because you kind of led into some of these other questions, but I immediately just thought about hate, right? I don't believe, and there's research to support that, we're not born to hate people. We're not born to categorize. Those are things that we learn over a period of time. So that was an example that made me think, I'm not sure that we're born with a blank slate.
What do you mean hate? You mean prejudice?
Sure, prejudice.
Okay.
Yeah. Our tendencies potentially to stereotype. I think you had mentioned this a long time ago in a panel that you were at. I think it's good to categorize things, especially because we have so much information, right, that's available to us all the time, that we need to categorize, we need to prioritize, we need to have biases towards certain things. But I don't necessarily think that our biases are something that we're born with. I think those are things that we learn over time through direct and indirect experiences.
So what about more naturalistic biases? So I don't like black coffee, and neither does my mother, and neither did my whoever.
So when did you figure out that you don't like black coffee? Which that's terrible. Right.
Well, that's
you don't like. Do you like cream in it? Is that what you're telling me?
I don't
You just don't like coffee.
I mean, if I have to drink coffee, I'm gonna drink it black.
Like my soul?
Yes, even like your soul. I'm not fixing. I don't like that. So I figured that out because when I tasted black coffee as a kid, I was like, ugh.
Yeah. So is that experience, or is that something that has to do with your biological predisposition? I think it's easier to say experience, right?
I mean, I don't know if I was ever like, I don't know if I like this black coffee. I think I might try it again. I think it was like immediately I was like, no.
Just didn't like it.
Just don't like it.
Yeah.
You don't think that's biological? You don't think that's like...
I think it's combination. I think the question is flawed.
No.
The question is flawed.
Now I do remember this debate.
Because I think you can definitely distinguish between I don't like this kind of person, and I don't like this kind of food, or I don't like this kind of drink. I think those might come from different places, which is odd because it's kind of the same like feeling that you have towards people. Or do you think it comes from the same place, or do you think it comes from different places? One's biological maybe, and one is, or hereditary, whatever. And one is
I think there's
social.
a lot of overlap between them, where it might be hard to tease those apart unless we think about like a specific individual and a specific situation. I know that's not the answer
It depends.
that you want.
Right.
Yeah.
No. I mean, I told you guys you could eventually say it depends. This would be a good time to say that.
That's the famous. That's the answer to everything in psychology.
I know, but I think when like I'm gonna say regular people hear this, they hear us
What is a
say
regular person, though?
someone who is not here. Someone who does not look at this all the time.
Yes.
Someone who hears a professor say, "Oh, it depends," and they go, "All right then," and I just drop it because they don't know what that means.
Yeah.
They don't know what "it depends" means, or when you try to say what overlaps, they're like, "What overlap?" So.
Yeah.
Are you saying like, what do you guys think? Do you think that the two, hate or dislike of someone versus something, like a taste in something, did those come from the same place or from different places? Is someone who's got a racist father gonna turn out racist, or is...
I'd say those are different. I agree you learn racism or something like that because it's a culture and it's what you're brought up around or exposed to. But when it comes to like I don't like the taste of something, that's something like I decide when I try it, I have a reaction to it. So I think that's not learned.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I do think though that some of the like tastes and stuff not necessarily views towards people, but some of the tastes and stuff can be like almost hereditary and stuff from like biology and things like that.
Our preferences for things.
Yeah,
right.
you know,
biologically driven.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's when you're talking about preferences, like taste in.
I think that you just haven't had a good cup of black coffee.
Yeah, this is something we got to take care of.
That's okay.
I heard
have
full
mine.
world marriage for anybody who's listening.
Hershey, you can have the coffee I can't have. So
We're done. So the opposites attract. This is probably my favorite argument to have with my mother because. So let me explain. We were at someone's wedding, and the bride stood up and did her thing in front of everybody and said, we're such opposites and that's so great. And I looked at my mom and I was like, what did she just say? And I was like, opposites, what does she mean? That's not true. And my mom was like, we'll tell that to batteries. And I was like, but we're not talking about batteries, we're talking about people. So
I need to meet your mother.
and then I was going to say that. And then I looked at somebody else, who was the wife of my mom's pastor, and I was like, what do you think? She's in psychology, actually.
Yeah.
She's going to become a student counselor for grade school level children.
Okay.
And so obviously our conversation stopped there. I don't know what else she's doing. I lost interest. I'm just kidding. I'm sorry, Tamara. She said, yes, absolutely, opposites attract. And so I think what people are thinking is, oh, he's more outgoing, she's not, or she's funnier, he's not.
Right.
I don't think, if you say somebody who wants kids and somebody who doesn't want kids, well, they're just perfect for each other because they're opposites. So people who said yes, by the way, who said yes, opposites attract?
I
don't remember.
Okay, why do you think opposites attract? Tell me what you were thinking there.
I have to rethink this.
No. Dang it. I didn't mean to.
I think the only reason I kind of believe behind that theory is that I think, people don't want to date themselves necessarily. I think, in the easiest way to say it, I think, that you look for characteristics and things that you don't necessarily have. Because there's certain
to serve
things
as a compliment.
Yes, exactly. There's certain things that you're going to think, I am not very outgoing, but I appreciate people that are because I'm not. And, I find that awesome about you, therefore I look for that, if that makes sense. I think there's certain traits we look for.
Are you saying that two introverts can't have a good relationship?
They definitely can, but
to have something
it'll be a
else
very
that's not
introvert
common.
relationship.
Yeah, so they won't go out. They won't meet up very much.
You couldn't have everything similar.
No, that
yeah. I don't think you're going to find anybody. Well, I mean, maybe you find people who you're too similar to, and then you don't get along.
Yeah. I don't know. What's the other side?
What?
Is it my turn?
Can
I thought Steven
I ask a
Yeah.
Can I
What's up,
ask a
Steven?
clarification question
Yeah,
here?
absolutely.
Are you talking about like opposites as in how society perceives them, or how you would perceive each other? Because there is a difference there.
So walk me through those two differences.
Okay, so take how I am in public, in the band or whatever. How I'm gonna act in the band versus how I'm gonna act one-on-one with one of my friends is completely different. I'm not gonna be the same person. So a lot of people will have that problem in different situations.
I think a lot of the research talks about it more from the perspective of what is my perception of my partner. And there can be some influences in terms of, what does society say about my partner as well? I think a lot of it stems, though, from how do I view my partner, and am I similar or different to my partner?
Okay. I just wanted to make the distinction there because...
That's a really good question.
I mean, yeah, you make a good point that in different situations we're going to act and express ourselves differently, based on what's appropriate for the situation. But, I might not be as outgoing around, if I'm in a room full of professors, I'm probably going to shut up and not be talking a whole lot.
Yeah.
So there's only one of you right now, so it's cool.
Peter knows I don't shut up anyway.
But, neither does Carson. Right.
It's a good thing.
So, no. So if I am in a room full where I don't feel like it's appropriate for me to be my full rambunctious self, that's fine, but I'm still myself. I'm just not expressing it as much. But I'm still rambunctious. I'm still crazy. And I'm still talkative. But I'm not going to be talkative right then and there. Versus I'm with Stephanie, who's not very talkative and not rambunctious. And she's always going to be like that.
Yeah, I get it. It's just because I know, I consider myself an introvert. So, I know, and I have, most of my friends are the same way or whatever. And so, I know how they don't, like I said, they're not the same around a bunch of people as they are on an individual basis. And it's really funny when you get people who look at who are why are you two friends, and they're because you have nothing in common, but in reality you actually have a lot in common. You just don't show that to everybody else.
Okay, so you mean people may see opposites, but they're not really opposites. Is that what you mean?
Yeah,
Okay.
because they don't really know the person.
Right. That's why I think it has more to do with what is my perception of my partner, right? Or my friend, whomever, you know.
I guess I take it too literally then, because when people say we're opposites, no, that's a perfect point actually, because it does tease the difference between, okay, were you thinking literally opposites? No, we're not literally opposites. But I tend to think that's what people mean when they say opposites attract. I'm like, oh, really? So you guys have nothing in common at your base, and that's why you guys are perfect together. You know, that doesn't make
The thing to tell
sense.
people is that everything is a matter of perspective.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
So I guess like when somebody stands up at their wedding to make their speech and she or he says, "I'm so glad my partner's nothing like me," or that we're opposites.
I'd be offended.
I mean, that's why I give them a weird look, 'cause I'm like, that doesn't sound good.
That doesn't sound healthy.
I think a lot of that question, though, stems from, I think, I don't want to say that it depends again, because in this instance,
Just say it.
but in this instance, maybe it doesn't as much, but I think Becky you're absolutely right in terms of, you know, you want someone who's going to compliment you, and, you know, maybe if I'm not so good at one thing, then if my partner is, that might be a really helpful thing. So in that instance, it would be a good thing. I think it all just stems back to what you value, right? So when you were saying that example of, you know, I want to have kids, but my partner doesn't. If that's something that's really important to you and a value to you, then that's maybe where you're going to see some conflict.
Does the whole research on how you become more like the 5 people that you spend the most time with, does that play into this here?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. I think it comes down to values, though. You have to kind of have in common, like, base, like, religion, family, those kind of things. Yeah, you kind of have to be in sync on that. But
which is kind of interesting, because there is a lot of research with happy couples and mostly with married couples where they don't necessarily have the same religion, or, you know, they practice differently, but it might be because that's not something of value to them. You know, I can go to the Baptist church and my partner can go to the Methodist church, and we don't find that maybe necessarily to be problematic because we don't necessarily care that we're not going to the same church.
Right.
Or someone who places a lot of stock and value in going to the same place, raising their kids in the same tradition, then that's where you might start to have some conflict.
yeah.
So it sounds like now we're starting to divide the difference between what's like a preference versus what's a solid, I need this to also be in you, because if it's not, then I can't. So like someone can be an atheist and someone can be a Christian, but if the Christian partner does not think it's that important for the other person to agree or necessarily go to church with them or agree with them, then it's probably not going to be that bad. But if their value is to agree on this most fundamental thing that they've grown up with, and of course, you know, this comes back to experience, and did you grow up, did someone, you know, install in you that value, and if it wasn't, then it's not going to be a problem. But so yeah, I think people will, I know, Becky, you just mentioned, you know, religion being a value, but I would say it's not necessarily, religion isn't necessarily the value in itself, it's more of how seriously you take it.
That's true.
You know what I mean? I mean, you can still take your religion seriously, but not to the point where you have to hang out with people who only think that, or you have to, or, you know, if you can hang out with people, but you have to marry somebody who definitely agrees too.
Yeah, my favorite kind of people are people who can be like, you don't have to agree with me on my beliefs, but that doesn't have to stop us from being friends. Like,
Yeah, sure. And I think a lot of it comes back to just those core ideologies, right? Because people change.
Yeah.
So
Right.
if you think about, you know, lasting or healthy relationships, people are going to change over the course of time. But if maybe some of your core ideologies are similar, so maybe not exactly the same, but similar enough, then as people change and adapt, it might not be as troublesome, right? As if you're starting with your core ideologies being wildly different.
Yes.
So the last one we talked about was tribalism. And so what this used to mean was like literally teams of people who were, one was wearing, you know, a white I don't know even what to call it. What did like cavemen wear? Did they wear anything?
Toga? No.
Yeah, whatever. Literally people who were in tribes.
Doing the baseball.
Togas? I don't know. Under diapers? I don't know what they wear.
God.
Literally people who have
loincloth?
Yeah, loincloth. Sure.
I'm just
That's
picturing
an elegant way to put it.
I'm just picturing this tribal baby now in a diaper. And
Yes, with a spear. Yes. Yes. Little mini ones were the good days. So it's because, primal days, obviously we're not like that anymore. I mean, we do go to war with each other, but, you're not going to see Texas and Kansas go to war with each other. Oh, that's not a good example. You're not going to see Texas and Oregon go to war with each other.
I mean, the Civil War happened, so...
I mean, yeah. I stand corrected. There goes that. Right, you don't see us gearing up and throwing spears at each other and lining up.
Do we not, though? Maybe not spears, but you do see people committing acts of violence against each other based on their group. Maybe not war to the extent of
but I just mean obviously I think it's still here, but we've changed our ways of tribalism. And I think mostly everybody said, no, it does not serve us well anymore. So that's funny because we were just talking about evolutionary psychology and why altruism can't be pure because that's how we survived, is taking care of each other. Yet now we still have tribalism. So that, you guys don't think that serves us anymore.
Right now, maybe.
What does that mean?
Well, I think with the current political climate, all the things that are happening just today, too, in terms of the division, and this division that we're feeling between groups, is not necessarily serving us well in terms of being able to get along, in terms of being able to make policies and laws that are going to be in the benefit of everyone. I think this division is creating more conflict to where we can't get things done anymore. We can't talk to each other, and we can't...
Right.
We can't decide on things that are going to be in the best interest of everyone.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't every generation think that they're in the worst political, what do you call it? Era. Everybody thinks that they're in the worst of times and that it can only get better from here. And we've seen, obviously, it can get much worse.
Oh, yeah.
So if tribalism if it's not working, why is it permeating everybody? Maybe, I don't know what other countries are like. I don't know if it's the same. I think it's relatively close to the same in other places, whether developed or not. People are always going to pick sides.
Yeah.
And they want to be on the side that they favor or that favors them.
I think it's kind of like what Dr. Jeter was saying is a lot of it's because they're not talking to, like the left and the right don't want to talk to each other.
Yeah, it's so polarized.
Well, that's the point being in a tribe, though.
They're like, if I'm right, you're wrong, and if you're right, I'm wrong. So we can't talk to each other. We can't meet in the middle. And the problem is, until they meet in the middle, nothing gets done.
Well, and I think it comes down to, again, let's say you're brought into one side. Were you influenced in that side? Were you born into that side? What made you be on that side? So I think that's why it gets passed down and keeps getting used, because you have generation after generation or people being brought in constantly.
So you think that mostly people are born into these, at least for our sake of argument, political opinions? People
or
are
influenced, yeah.
Okay.
To a certain extent, yes. I think that a lot of it has to do with how invested they get in things, how much they... A lot of it, in the current day, I think a lot of it has to do with the education. How much are they educated about what's going on? How much do they seek out information? Not just information about their side, but all sides, because it's really hard to get information from both sides nowadays. What is it? That's not hindsight bias. What's the one?
Confirmation bias.
Confirmation bias. Yeah, that just people will believe what they want to believe.
Right. True.
Quick with the microphone.
Me? Yeah. Practice. So I guess my question would be, so what are we supposed to do about it? Because we have kind of two different sides of this. So we have altruism, which helps us even though we're not necessarily doing it for all the right reasons, whatever you want to call it, but it helps us out. So we want to keep it around, so we want to keep helping each other, we want to keep surviving. And then we have tribalism, which is, I think we can all agree, tearing us more apart. But I would say it's probably just as strong as that urge to help somebody else out, even if not for pure reasons. So how do those two things live or exist in the same place? Sorry, Whitney, go ahead.
That's okay. I think if you're going to talk a little bit about the evolutionary psych side of things, kinship selection is something that they talk a lot about with altruism, and the idea, right, that we are more likely to be pro-social and help out people who are like us, maybe part of our family or part of our group.
Yeah.
So I feel like those two things go together really well, that altruism, or that pro-social behavior, that need to belong and that need to help, is really at its strongest whenever it's someone of your family or your friend or someone that's close to you, your group, basically. And sometimes I feel like that could coincide a little bit with the in-group and out-group. So I'm going to help my own, but I might not help people who fall outside of my particular group.
Bigger investment.
Yeah.
So people probably aren't more likely to help somebody who's not in their group.
You're more likely to help someone who is in your group and,
Right.
and directly related and relevant to you than you would be to help a stranger, random
Yeah.
stranger,
I agree
or
with
someone
that.
who wouldn't be in your group.
It's kind of funny where we draw those lines, though, because if we can talk about political lines, that's pretty easy to draw, because it's just basic questions you can ask somebody, and if they say yes or no, that's where you put them.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about, say, race or ethnicity, so I was born not surrounded by people of my ethnicity. I was not born around Hispanics. I was born around white people primarily. And so I come from their culture, and so I find it difficult to relate to other Hispanics or Dominicans in general. But somebody who is American but is raised around a family of Hispanics and friends who are Hispanic, they're not going to relate so well to somebody who's lighter skin or just Caucasian in general. And so it's kind of funny where we start to draw those lines, because we can say, well, race is obviously an in and out group thing. But for a lot of people, especially now, it's not really. It's about who you grew up around, and that's who you kind of connect to.
Yeah.
But that can be even funnier, because what if you don't like the people you grew up around, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you guys think about that? Do you think do you think that race is probably always going to be an in group out thing, or does it really just depend on who's driving? Just put it no better way.
It's a deep question.
I really want to go with the famous "it depends," but
Yeah.
That's fine. You can say depends, but then explain why you say that.
yes, I can get.
Well,
that.
I was just going to say, these remind me of those Miss America questions that we do in classrooms. We're trying to solve complex issues in 30 seconds or less. So these are really good questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm glad. Thank you.
So the question is, will race always be like a dividing factor amongst us? That
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing that, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
So we're seeing
we have
people.
a lot of
So
social
we're
constructions that
Yeah.
we create and generate
Right.
as a means to separate,
Yeah.
intentionally or unintentionally.
So we're still, it's weird to see now, because you would think we'd be over this.
Yeah.
You would hope.
But it's just looks like it's so ingrained, like it's just not going to go away,
I think this ties back into the blank slate. Maybe it is something that's biological or predisposed.
So, yes. So, let me go back to, let me put a tie in the tribes real quick.
There's the key.
Yes. So, the reason I brought up blank slate is actually because of Whitney. Because I was talking to her.
Oh, no.
So, we were talking about...
Was this off the record stuff we were talking about?
No, you never said that. You have to say that with me. You have to say that with me, or it's all coming
How
on.
much have I told you?
It's all, you should all be frightened now. So I have recently seen a little bit more of the conservative side when it comes to gender politics and things like that. So I can understand their frustration
Okay.
with having a seemingly infinite list of all these things people can identify as, and it's just frustrating to people who are like, what? I'm so dizzy right now.
Yeah.
This doesn't make sense. I think you're making it up. And I know I'm not going to say they're making it up, all of them. But so this blank slate thing Whitney and I were talking about, because she likes to bring people in to talk to her students about it. And so I was trying to say, like, I can relate to the people who were like, this doesn't make sense. I don't really think this is true scientifically. And so she said, well, there's not really a whole lot of evidence on it. There's not really a whole lot of research on it. And that's true, right? There's not really a whole lot of research on gender expression, gender identity, the difference between gender and sex.
There certainly is quite a bit of research on it. I think
on
what I was saying, though, is that there is more research pointing to a biological side of things, and not as much research in comparison than trying to look at environmental or situational factors. So when we talk about things like gender identity, as well as things like sexual orientation, it might be difficult, and this is what I was saying, is sometimes I can understand why people, I don't want to say get upset, but I can understand why maybe they think that I am only presenting one side, is because the research now, there's an overwhelming amount of research that is just looking at the biological factors related to these topics, whereas the environmental and situational factors are understudied in comparison.
Yeah. And I think that's where humanity teachings kind of come into this. And I think that I've been seeing a lot of clash between humanities and, say, biology researchers, because biologists are saying, no, we are absolutely not born with a blank slate, because we know enough about human sexuality, just like we know enough about animal sexuality. We know that sometimes the female is bigger and has more testosterone than the male, and sometimes it's opposite. And with us, obviously, it's the male has more testosterone and is generally bigger than the female. We know enough about that to say it's not, sexuality is not just a made-up thing. You know, not everybody is. Some people, I think this was the thing, once some people would say, well, everybody's bisexual deep down inside. And I don't know where that came from. What do you guys think about that?
Well, just one quick thing. I'm sorry, Stephen, to interrupt you. We have to be very careful and mindful of the difference between sex and gender, and sexuality and gender issues. Gender is a social construct. Things that what we're talking about right now are more biologically driven and biologically based. And that might be why maybe there's more research on that side than as well.
So what makes us think that... Oh, sorry, Stephen.
I was just... That was basically exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, I was going to agree on that. There's a difference.
So what makes us think that there's a difference between gender and sex? Where did that come from?
There's, like, the physical difference, and then, like, this, the social construct, like, what we as a society look at as, like, this is feminine, this is...
masculine?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I think recently the lines have been getting more blurred as...
So what does that mean, the line is more blurred?
That socially it's more acceptable, like, so go back years ago where women were not seen to be able to do this. That's what a man does. Or men were not seen to do this. This is what a woman does. And I feel like as time's gone by, we've decided that you can start blurring those lines and overlapping a little bit. Like men can start doing this or women can start doing that.
This is great because I just watched the movie Iron Jawed Angels. So
I've never heard of it.
I don't know that.
It's about the women. So. Iron Jawed Angels, yeah. We just watched it in Women Leadership, so.
So I guess then, because I'm still trying to understand where the conflict is with this, because a lot of people are saying what you're saying, Becky, that there's obviously a difference, because now the roles are getting bigger, they're expanding, and some people are saying there is no difference between gender and sex, because if you're female, you're just female, and that's what you mean. So I started thinking about it a little bit, and I was talking to my friend Jaren about this, and I was saying, why do we need these meticulous labels to define these certain things about ourselves? Why can't I just dress how I dress, whether I wear pants all the time, and look confusing, to say the least, and still, wait, let me finish, and still call myself a woman, and that's it. That's all I say.
Because society is full of haters.
Okay.
I was going to say, you absolutely can.
I know that you can, and it's just that since the roles are expanding anyway,
Yes.
why can't we just still call things male and female? But it doesn't mean one thing anymore. It means all these different things. So why?
I think that's the beauty in having this more comprehensive list, right? It's because for you, you're saying, well, I can still identify with the dichotomies that were available to me previously, whereas other people, right, maybe don't feel that way. So something good about the list, although I agree with you, right? There are certain times when I think, gosh, I just can't keep up. They just keep coming out, right, with these new things, and there's some really interesting research about labels and what people want to be called or what we should be doing. But I think that's kind of the beauty in it is that you can still adhere to, right, the label that you want to, but now other people can adhere to the labels that they want as well. So I think it just makes things a little bit more comprehensive and more inclusive. It puts things on more of a continuum as opposed to a dichotomy. And as psychologists, I feel like that's always what we are trying to do, is to be able to measure things more on this continuum, to where you're not purely just extroverted or introverted, right? Or you don't just have masculine qualities or feminine qualities, right? It's a little bit more complex than that. And I think that the labels try to help address some of those complexities. Whether or not we're doing that in the most efficient way, right, and succinct way, is, I think, something that could be argued. But that's really what I see it as, is we're trying to be more comprehensive and inclusive for those of us who don't fit within that realm of these dichotomies.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say that, for the longest time we had just the men and just the women. That's just two separate sections. And like, let's say you do have traits from both. Where do you feel like you fit then? Like, did you have identity issues because you didn't know where to go? So I think that's where we've come up with the many different A through Z.
Yeah, and I think, and more recently, kind of more in our lifetime, whatever, a lot of this, like, all this stuff's been happening, but it was not socially acceptable, and it's becoming more socially acceptable now during our lifetime in a more rapid movement than usually takes place with things like this. So it's just,
So for someone who is born in a generation that's more like this one, maybe a little bit more organized than this one later, who isn't growing up with the strict male and female gender roles. I don't think I was really born into that. I think that was probably way before me. But someone who's even farther down the way than we are, and they still decide to call themselves a woman, even though someone in the 1950s would be so confused looking at this person. Is that possible, or will that person have to have all these different things, all these different labels when they introduce themselves to somebody?
I think it's totally possible still.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's possible.
So then eventually the labels will just go away?
No.
I think they're changing.
What do you mean by that?
I think that that person back in the day would have thought of as a woman, like that expectation for women is allowed to evolve and change. And they might see it differently from where it was, but women then versus women now have a different meaning, I would say.
Yeah. But they can still be women.
Yes.
So like so someone in the 1950s was probably going to call somebody a woman who has a more evolved career, which is very common now. But somebody in the 1950s would look at that woman and be like, is she a lesbian? Is she like secretly a guy? But we don't look at that any differently.
Yes.
So I guess I empathize with the confusion on, well, why can't you just be a woman and then that's that? Why do you have to have all these different, why do you have to cut yourself into these pieces?
Yeah.
And then, feed it to everybody one at a time? Why can't that all be you, and that all being you is just a woman? You're just a woman. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
What I'm asking?
It definitely does. I just don't know that our labels anymore, especially as they used to be, like Becky was pointing out, are inclusive of you as a human being, right? So I think you are more complex than just saying, I am a woman, right?
Well, you can explain. I mean, you can say I'm a woman, and then people are going to want to know more about you, obviously.
But then when someone wants to know more about you, what would you say? Like, what labels would you use? Are the
I don't know if I'd use. Yeah. I don't know if I'd use a label. I'd probably just describe myself like I use. So I'm not going to call myself a comedian just because I'm funny and because I enjoy humor. I mean, literally, I'm not a comedian, so I can't claim that I'm in a business that I'm not in.
Yeah.
But I just mean if there was like a word for someone who makes people laugh other than, I guess, funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just say I like making people laugh. So it was like, for example, someone who is, I brought this up last semester, someone who is sapiosexual. That means they are attracted to intelligence only? It's a big deal.
Okay.
Intelligence is a big deal.
Okay.
Yes, intelligence is a big deal for me as well.
Yeah, same.
Why does that deserve its own sexuality is my question. That's my question.
That's a good question.
Overall. Gender's a little different, I guess, because, well, I mean, not really. Why can't I just kind of carry myself differently than other women and still call myself a woman? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so we're talking purely based sexuality here now.
We can talk about the sapiosexual example if that's easier, yeah. So I'm still attracted to intelligence. It's a big thing for me. I'm probably not going to be attracted to you if you're not intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to call myself sapiosexual. That's just a part of me.
Okay.
It doesn't make up my entire sexuality either.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's tough.
Do you have an answer, or are you just waiting?
I'm just waiting.
That's,
I feel bad.
no, it is a really tough question because I mean I'm the same way. Like I'm attracted to intelligence or whatever, but that's not the only thing that goes into that with me or whatever, you know. And so it's hard. It's really hard to like. I don't know how to answer that. Oh gosh.
I
don't know how to answer that either.
Yeah.
Because then I look at I mean, I'm not gonna doubt somebody when they tell me that this is what they like. That's not it.
Yeah.
The problem is, why did you have to tell me that? Like, you know,
Yeah.
why did you have to, when I said, what kind of people do you like, and you say, I'm a sapiosexual. What do you mean? I like intelligent people. Only? Well, no.
Oh.
So then what else do you like? You know, but then they give me
Yeah.
all these different labels for each thing they like.
Yeah.
This hasn't
okay.
happened, by the way.
And
But I'm just saying, like, the weirdness that's going on here, that I think this is where the people get kind of like when he's like kind of upset.
yeah.
Because it seems pointless.
Yes. And I think that, I mean, personally, I think that some of that has to do with people like to have a name for things, like whether it be a label or
Sure, yeah.
whatever, to be able to claim or to be able to like have or like to make them more that individual. Like, this is how I am. This is what I like. So whether that be them trying to make their own little section, that's what I guess I see with it.
What do you think, Steven?
Oh gosh. Yeah, I kind of have to agree. Like people like to make their own labels, but they don't. I don't know. I'm kind of on your side here. Like I'm not entirely sure I understand why. Yeah, like why you have to have multiple ones and why you can't just be like, oh, I like intelligence and I like this and I like this, but I don't need an individual name for it all. I can just explain that.
I mean, some people do say, I am only attracted to this, and it doesn't matter what else it is about you.
Mm-hmm.
But
What
that's
do you think about that?
I mean, power to them. I don't know.
Well, and maybe they feel they need a label to like justify it as well, to like have something like this is the reason, or like this is my the reason behind it. But yeah,
Yeah.
so
I don't have like a 100% foolproof answer.
You don't have to have an answer. Just let me know what you're thinking.
Yeah. I think that it's always important for us to remember and consider to just step back in terms of just because these different labels maybe make me feel uncomfortable or they might seem useless or pointless to me, to do a little perspective taking about why we have them in the first place. Because some of these labels that we're talking about were started because, right, we were not being inclusive of certain people, or we were violating their rights to be who they were, right? And as it's becoming more socially acceptable, now we can be able to have these discussions. Now we can come up with different ways to classify and categorize for these certain things. So for me, I agree with you that some of these things do seem a little they seem interesting, right? I when I sit back and I think about it, I'm not sure why. The only thing that I can really think about is that I come from a place of privilege where I fall within the dichotomies. I have never needed a different label for things like my well, gender might be a separate issue, but for things like my sexuality, for example, I never needed a different label, and I've never felt like I needed to express certain things to people in a way that would fall outside of the norm. And because of that, I don't know that I can speak to why do people feel like they need something else, other than just saying, right, that for such a long time we haven't been operating on this continuum. It's only been black and white. It's only ever been binary. And now that we have an opportunity to express ourselves in ways that don't fit within that mold, I'm not going to tell someone, even if it is confusing for me, or even if I think that it's pointless, that they shouldn't be able to do it.
Right.
Yeah. And I think you're saying that as well.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
You know, as a disclaimer, I mean, we don't have anybody in here who can tell us.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, you know, this isn't necessarily to decide for them who they should be or what they should call themselves. This is just like an outsider perspective of people who do need those things. It's like, why do you need those things?
Right.
You know?
And to us, it might be, or to me, I'm going to speak for myself. For me, it might be confusing because I like I said, I have not needed different labels. But for someone who does, my confusion, I feel like, is not worth them being able to, you know, not express themselves or not feel like, you know,
feel like they can't.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, no, I'm saying that. Yeah, I'm the same way. Just because I don't understand it doesesn't mean it's not.
Right.
There's no
And I
reason
think
for
that's
it.
what everyone here, you know, is saying. Certainly Carson too. But I just don't know. I don't know why. I know, right? I don't want to make it seem though that you're over there in the corner saying, right, we don't need these labels, and everyone just, you know, suck it up.
I'm not prepared to say that.
Right.
I'll say it to like Jaren because I know it riles him up. But well, sorry, what was
Actually, my favorite thing to tell people is if they do, you know, if I don't understand something, like just as like educate me. I was like, I'm on.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe,
Exactly.
And maybe this is what those labels are doing, right? So we don't understand it, we don't get it. In some ways, we think that it is useless or pointless, but maybe it is an awareness or an education issue.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, I have to let everyone go now. I promised.
Sorry.
It's been a fantastic talk. Thank you to everybody who came in, and thank you to everyone who was listening. Please come back next time. I will be taking a break next week, but stay tuned for more throughout the semester. Do you guys have any last comments before we go?
No.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
This was a lot of fun.
Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, this is great what you do, so thank you.
Yeah, of course. Well, this was Coalition M. I'm Carson Lopez, and thank you for coming on, and have a good evening, everybody.